Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, good not good,
Very good
good
evening,
evening.
sir.
Great. Okay, so team, today we are on to the second day of our learning. We had yesterday started off with with our course, right? And the course that we're here for, as we discussed yesterday, is the DevOps masterclass, right? And as a part of that, we have discussed yesterday what are the topics, what are the overall learning that we're going to have for next few days. Now, as a part of that, if you remember yesterday, we were working on a particular case study or rather a scenario. And through that, we were exploring and we were understanding the concepts, right? And today we're going to do the same. We're going to take it further and we're going to understand, okay, some really important concepts that are required for this to go for DevOps, right? So let me just share my screen. Let's just have a quick look at what we have seen in the very last session or the first session yesterday. Not much. If you remember yesterday, after having introductions, I've taken introductions from your end as well. Then in fact, I asked you about what is your opinion, what is your take on DevOps? What have you heard about it? And what are the benefits that DevOps does provide? Now, the thing is, we don't know DevOps yet, but I mean, whatever the learning, whatever the knowledge that we've had from before, on that basis, we were trying to, compile the things together. All right. So yes, you have all told me it has something to do with development and operations. There is some cost saving that does happen. Time is something that we can curtail a lot on. Automation, we said, it is one of the characteristics of DevOps. It gives you with fast and reliable, life cycles, tools and services are what we're going to make use of, through which we can get onboarded onto the DevOps world. And yes, it also has a aspect of monitoring in it, through which we get insights into the environment, get into the application, and then make it even better. And don't worry, all of this, as I've told you, we're going to justify that as we are going further. We'll be exploring it entirely. Then we have had introductions, and this is the application. This is that particular project, right? Or rather, that scenario on which we have been working since yesterday. We said that, okay, let's just say we have got our manager, and the manager has asked us to work on an application. Okay, the company is looking to have an application. And a Facebook-like application is what we have assumed, but we didn't know, right, what kind of application at all. And that's where we had started to put a plan for it. Okay, and that's where this is what is a planning that we had set up yesterday. We're going to continue with that today. So that's why it's important that you remember what we have seen yesterday. So the very first thing, team, as you yourself told me, is you need to gather the requirements, right? First is the requirement gathering, where you'll understand what exactly is the kind of application that the user is, or the app manager in our case is looking for. We'll do the analysis on top of it, and then we'll formulate a problem, right? So understanding the problem itself is the first step, right, to solve it. So that's what we are doing in the very first step, requirement gathering and analysis. And then on that basis, we'll plan out how we are going to solve that problem, isn't it? So planning and designing will come thereafter, where whatever the problem formulation that we have done, on top of that, then we are going to try to solve it, or then we're going to plan it first in order to solve it, right? So what framework, what language, what approach, what tools, what services, what resources we are going to use, all of that planning will be doing in the second stage here, at this particular stage, right? Then we have discussed that it is going to be the thinking part of our application, right? So after all of the thinking part is done, then we actually started about setting up or started implementing what we have planned, right? And that's where this entire setup we had kind of put out yesterday, right? So we discussed team first that, okay, there will be a person called developer. Isn't it? A developer will be someone who is going to start this process, right? Who will initiate this process where he or she will start writing the code for the application. And then because we discussed that, okay, there might be multiple developers, people working on the same project, multiple developers working on the same project, it is not practical to save or keep the code on your own machine. We then put that code on a place like GitHub. Now, again, all these services that I've mentioned, it is quite overview. Okay, don't worry about it. Even if you don't know a single thing about this, don't worry. It is just an overview that you have to understand. And all of this we are going to learn in a lot more detail and in full detail from scratch as we are going to go with this course. Okay, it is just an overview. Just remember the terms and the concepts. Don't worry about understanding them just now. We'll be understanding them as we are going to go further with this course. Right. So the first thing we said, a place like GitHub, Bitbucket, are quite popular for carrying your code. We call them SCM and VCS. We'll see all of this. What is SCM, VCS? What are the benefits of it? But timing, just know that it is a place where the code can be kept. Right? So we are keeping our code there in the place like GitHub, Bitbucket. And then what happens, and this is important, team, you need to know what's happening in these phases. How it does, we'll see that. But what is happening, you should know it. Okay, for example, that code is then generally taken for build purpose. Build is where we compile the code. As we discussed yesterday, it generates the intermediate artifacts or outputs. And team, this diagram, this is one diagram that will be coming for, or will be coming back to for literally entire course. Okay, because that's what our overall motive is, to understand this diagram and implement that. Okay, so it's important that you understand it. And again, the how to do and everything, we'll see that over the time. Okay, but the build is the place where we'll be compiling our code. This place will be basically generating intermediate outputs or artifacts. Now, I've given you some examples, like, for example, if I'm working on Java application code, I may want to generate a var file. Now, how it's done and everything, I'm going to show you that too. How var file gets created, how a tool like Maven can be used for it, right? So, build is where we generate such artifacts which are required for taking it further. Testing is also important, where we want to make sure that our code qualifies for all the tests. It basically satisfies all the tests, all the compliance that we have got. So a popular tool like Jenkins is very popular. Gradle, Maven is what we can use there for getting going. We're going to see all of that again there too. Further, as I told you, just software is not enough, right? Just software is not enough. We also need some sort of hardware, isn't it, to go with? So in order to get that particular hardware, just mute all for time being. I believe there was some mic on. Anyway, like I was saying, team, that just the software is not enough, right? Just the code is not enough. We want a place where the code will run. Like I told you yesterday, that the Facebook that you're using today, right? It is running on some infrastructure, some server, some storage, some database should be there in the backend, isn't it? So in order for that to happen, we don't have the infrastructure required for that yet. And that's exactly what we do in the provisioning stage. Okay, so in the provisioning stage, we are provisioning the required infrastructure. A tool like Terraform, CloudFormation, these are popular tools that we can use for provisioning the infrastructure in an automated way. We call this also as IAC. We also call this as IAC, infrastructure as a code, right? Where we create the required infrastructure through code. How do you do it? What is Terraform? How automation can be brought in? Everything we'll see in this course. And then while everything is done, then we'll move for the final deployment. Deployment is what? Just to put it simply, deployment is like running your software onto your hardware. Isn't it? Right now, let's just say you are having your cell phone in your hand, right? Now, whatever physical aspect of your cell phone is, right, that is called as hardware. And what is running on your screen, right, from booting up to shutting it down, whatever running on your screen, that's the code, right? So that mic on. So like I was saying that that hardware and software combination has to be there, right? Otherwise, I mean, you just see, just imagine you have your cell phone right now. Only software, will it suffice? I mean, no, right? We require some hardware to host it. Just hardware, is it enough? No, right? We require software to run. And again, otherwise, that hardware is useless, isn't it? You'll just carry a piece of metal then, nothing else. So that's where this deployment is important, where you will run that software onto your hardware. That is called as deployment. How that's done, what services to use, how it is being carried out, everything we are going to see that. And finally, we are monitoring, where generally we get insights into the application. So let's just say your Facebook is running, right, on the servers across the globe. But now you want to get insights. Now you want to understand how it is working. Now you want to make sure that it is running the way you want, right? So for all of that, monitoring is a phase that we include there, which is where you'll get to know about your resources. You'll be sure that the things are all going well with it, right? Now, team, this is yesterday. This is much what we have discussed yesterday. And this is, again, very important. That's why I've recalled it again today, because we are going to require this today, from today on, for every session. Now, this process, if you remember yesterday, we have called it as software development life cycle. Remember, software development life cycle. Okay, it's a life cycle of a software development, to put it simply. SDLC, right? This is one term I'm sure you must have heard it already. Now, one thing that I wanted to emphasize here, and that's the reason why I have put it here, is, you see, there are in total two important teams which are working for this life cycle to go well. Or you see, there are two important teams who are making this software development possible for us, right? Now, one of them is for sure development team or developers, right? So I'll just write it here. One is development team. Okay, which is responsible for writing the code for your application. You have code for your infrastructure, all of it, right? So development team is a very important team in this software development life cycle. But there is another team. So once the developers are done writing the code, there is another team that will then take up what the developers have done. Okay, then they will test whether that code is good enough. And they will deploy that application onto the production. They will monitor it, they will evaluate it, they will make sure that your code is transformed into a product. They'll make sure that it is running well. They make sure that it is stable. So all these things, everything literally after the development is done, it is taken care of by another team, and that team is called as operations team. Okay, so this is one thing that yesterday you were all saying, right? DevOps is development plus operations. But what is development? What is operations? That you have to understand first before you go any further. Right? So remember, development team is responsible for writing the code, or developing the code rather, application code. And operations team, thereafter, they will pick up the code from development team. Their responsibility, operations team responsibility, is to deploy that code in a reliable manner onto your destination. Okay, in this case, the destination will be a production. They also want to make sure that it is done reliably. They also want to make sure that it is a stable deployment. Right? They also want to evaluate the code to make sure it is good enough for production. They also want to make sure that production environment, I mean, whatever the servers or the infrastructure that you have got, it is ready for it. And they also want to make sure that whatever is required for the deployment, they are there to take care of it. Okay, so in this course team, two very important terms that you have to understand is what is development and what is operations. Okay, and this is exactly what they are. And You see, we are not yet for DevOps. Okay, we have not yet started with DevOps. This is just a software development lifecycle, a general software development lifecycle. We are not using DevOps yet. Okay, we don't know DevOps yet. I'm just telling you a simple software development lifecycle. And today, or from today on, or gradually, we'll move towards DevOps. We'll see what DevOps is. Okay, but right now we have no idea about what DevOps is. Right now, I'm just telling you what is a software development lifecycle and what are the teams involved there. One is the development, other one is operations. Now, yes, you might say there are other teams as well. There might be security, there might be quality assurance and all. We'll add them over the time. Right now, the minimum two teams that are required for this process to work is development team responsible for development, operations team responsible for the deployment and making it a stable deployment ultimately. Okay, so now that we have understood what these two terms are, let's just see how in real world this software development life cycle is, handled by the companies over the for your applications, right? So I hope team, until here, the things are all clear. Okay, I think many of us have joined. Some of us were not there yesterday, but I've just, for that very reason, I have again revised everything that we have seen already, right? And now we are ready to move further with with the software development life cycles. Okay. Now, team, this process is the basis of everything. Okay, software development lifecycle. I hope these things are clear, team. Until here, a quick thumbs up would be great. Everyone, like yesterday, I hope you can find out the thumbs up button there. A quick thumbs up would be great, everyone. Any question if you have, you can always unmute. But I hope yesterday we have already discussed enough on this. And again, it's a good revision that we wanted to have today. And yes, we have gone about it. Yes, Madan, you have a doubt? I think your hand is raised. No, right? Great. Okay. So team, let's just get going. Yeah, I want your full attention now for this part. Because now that you have understood what software development lifecycle means, in fact, if you go on internet and search for it, there are some more phases as well you'll see. Might be release phase or some other phases. Don't worry. This is the most basic software development lifecycle that we're looking at. We'll add more things to it as we'll go further. Okay, we are right now at the very initial stage. We'll make it even better as we'll go further. But as you know, what is software development lifecycle? Now it's time for us to understand what are the ways of setting up this software development lifecycle, or what are the approaches of going for this software development lifecycle. Okay. Now there are three major approaches, team, that the companies have been using over the time. Okay. Now I'll tell you what are the names of it. So I'll just say approaches, that would be a better word. Software development life cycle approaches. Okay. Now you see the process will remain the same, the phases will remain the same, but the way they are conducted, it is different. And these are called as approaches. First one I'll just mention, which was very popular in the early days, some decades back. Okay, that approach is called as waterfall. Second, which is very popular thereafter, and even today we use it. Okay, which is called as Agile. And then the third one that is very popular today and the one that we are here for, it's called as DevOps. Okay, so you see, you need to understand, why we are going for DevOps. What are the alternatives that are available and why DevOps is better than the other options that are available for us. Right? And that's why this discussion is very important. So that tomorrow, when you go for an interview, someone will ask you, right? Yes, DevOps you're using, that's fine. But what are the other approaches that you could have gone for? What are the shortcomings of those other approaches because of which you are moving for DevOps, right? So in that case, you have to understand what is the difference, right? So let's just see what is the difference across these different approaches. And third one and last one is DevOps. And then we'll start exploring DevOps thereafter. Okay. So among the three, the first one, as I called it, it is called as Waterfall. Now, you see, team, as the name itself indicates, right? Waterfall is literally that only. It is literally that only. For example, you see what happens in the waterfall model of software development life cycle. Okay, that this process that we have outlined, right? This entire process that we have outlined, it happens in steps. In steps, like you have a waterfall, right? You know how a waterfall looks like, right? Let me just for the sake of showing you, okay, the analogy of it. Okay, let's just put a waterfall here. Not a model, just in general waterfall. If I just put it here, how you can see how does a waterfall go, right? It is going from the top to bottom, right? It's going this way. Literally exactly that what happens in this waterfall model as well, right? So what happens here is in this model, when you are willing or when you are actually looking forward or looking for setting up your application, okay, we know, right, what steps are involved there, isn't it? So the very first step which we have is requirement analysis. I'll just write it here. Okay, requirement analysis. Requirement gathering and analysis. Let's just put it this way. Right. Now, after this is done, then the next step that comes thereafter, it comes like this. You'll have planning and design. Plan and design. Okay. After planning and designing is done, then as you know, we will go for coding. Right. I mean, your developer will push the code, and put it into the GitHub repository. Right. And then we will then go for the build. Then we will go for deployment. Okay. So can you see the pattern here? What is happening, team? Is we are moving in steps. Now, the thing here is, once all the requirement gathering and analysis is done, then we move for planning and designing. Okay. Once all the planning and designing is done, then we move for application development. Once the entire code is developed, we then go for the build. Once the entire build is done, we then move for deploy. Okay, and then further as well. I mean, you'll have monitoring that's mentioned there. But what I'm trying to tell here, team, is here there is no coming back. Okay, let's just say as a team, right, or as a company, I'm the person, we have started this process, right? Isn't it? And today is what? Today, I believe, is 27th May, right? 27th May, 27th May, 2025. This is the date that you have started this software development lifecycle. Okay. The requirement gathering analysis took some 10 days, or let's just say some 15 to 20 days. Okay. So after those 15 to 20 days, then my process will move down for the planning and design. Then again, it will take some, let's just say 1 month. Okay, then coding, in fact, not 1 month, rather I would here say it will be a lot lesser than that. Let's just say it will take some 10 days. Now here, the code is the most important part, because that is what is the most, important phase in this process, right? Let's just say it takes 2 months here. Okay, then the build will happen. Let's just say it will take around 10 days for doing everything, and the deployment again will take, let's just say, 2-3 days. What I'm saying is, you see, I'm just giving an example. So what is happening, team, here is we are moving further after entirely done with that particular step, right? So the problem here is this entire process, if you just calculate, I think this will become 1 month, this will become it will become in total 3 months, this will become around 2.5 months. Let's just say in total, I'm having around 3 months that this will take up, right? For this entire process to work out. And I mean, this 3 months is even lesser. Because if you're working on a large or a big application, this time is going to be very huge. Okay, it's 6 months, 1 year, you never know. Well, what I'm saying here is the requirements that you have had at the beginning, what may happen is during this process, during the 3 months, it can as well change, right? Something new might show up, something better might show up. The requirements for the customer, right? This is XYZ customer, let's just say, or the client for whom you are creating this. Okay, the client may come up with a different requirement or some better, resource or some better approach. But the problem is with Waterfall, there is no coming back. Once the planning and designing is done, once the requirement analysis, all of that you have to do beforehand only. There is no flexibility. The problem, you see, try to understand. There is no flexibility here. Right? There is no coming back. Once you move further, you have to go till the very end. And then if, let's just say, the problem is the customer has told you at 27th May, after 3 months, the customer or your client will get to know whether the product is correct or not. But during that, if the requirements have changed, the problem is your customer will be not so happy. You'll have unhappy client because you cannot accommodate the requests or cannot accommodate any changes or modifications on the fly. Right? And ultimately, it may happen that your customer at the end of the day might not be happy at all. Right? Also, with the flexibility, time is also a big concern here. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, it's a huge time, right? It's a big time rather for such software development. And there is no in-betweens, right? You cannot modify anything, you cannot change anything in between. And after this long time, you will then be able to see that. And ultimately, what we'll have is unhappy client or customer, right? For whom you are creating this application for. Because there is no flexibility ultimately at the end. If I want to put it very simply, right, to kind of give you the analogy of this, let's just say, just to put it in an analogy point of view, let's just say your customer has come up to you and he or she is asking to create a car. Okay, the idea is the customer or the client is asking for creating a car. Okay, they want you to have a custom car being created. Okay, now what happens in the waterfall model, I'll tell you. Okay, here we go in steps. One thing at a time, and only that first thing is done, only when that one thing is done, then we'll move for the next part. Right, wherein what happens is you see here, the entire car requirements are understood. Entire car requirements are understood. What kind of car the customer is looking for? What are the features the customer is looking for? What are the, what is the dimension, the overall specification customer is looking at? You'll figure it out entirely beforehand only. Right? Then you'll move further for planning and design. Plan and design the car, right? Because you now have to fit the requirement with the practical, feasible planning around it, isn't it? What kind of resources are you going to use? What material are you going to use? Right? What electronics are you going to use within? What kind of structure are you going to use? What kind of shape are you going to use? Right? Then you'll start to work on the car. Actually, start to build the car. I mean, this code, build and deploy is where we are saying you'll actually start to work on this car aspect. Right? In components, you'll start to build it. Okay, you'll after planning and design, you'll start to build it entirely, and as such, you'll be finally delivering the. And here at the deployment, your car will be ready. Car is ready. The only problem is during this entire process, the customer cannot say anything. Okay, I mean, because the entire requirements and planning and designing is already done beforehand. Let's just say at this phase somewhere, if the customer is saying, okay, I feel like now I want these kinds of wheels. I earlier told you that I wanted this dimension of wheels, but I just feel now because right now these wheels are in buzz, and I'm really looking. There is no way you can do anything there. I mean, you cannot now interfere because the planning and the design and everything has already been done. The purchase and everything is already been done. You cannot do anything here. Okay, so this is the problem, team. Okay, I hope you are understanding. I'm giving with the analogy as well, and so is with the technical aspect. Is everything happens one after the other, and only when the entire thing is happened in the previous stage, then only you move for the next stage. And this is where it is inflexible. You have no say during this entire process. Right? So to curtail, now you have understood the problem here. To curtail this problem, we got a better approach. Now again, I'll just tell you one more thing here before we go here. Okay, here there is a development team. Here you have a development team, right? Team of developers who are working on this task. They have to develop the entire code as a whole together, right? They'll be working as a team because they are going to develop the entire code together. And then you'll have the operations team as well, which will take up the code thereafter and carry out the deployment. Okay, so when the developers are done, they will pass it on to operations after the entire development is done. Remember, entire development is done. Okay, then it will be passed on for the final deployment. Hey, just keep this in mind because this is going to be interesting further. Now, as we saw, these were some of the problems that Waterfall had, and the customer was not happy at all with this. Now, we had a better approach to curtail this problem, and that better approach is called as Agile. Agile. Now, what is Agile? Try to understand. In Agile, we understood the reason why we went for Agile rather is for the very problem that the Waterfall was having. Isn't it? In Waterfall, there was no flexibility. It was time consuming. The customer was ultimately unhappy at the end of the day. I mean, after 6 months and 1 year, you are handing over the car, and that too, customer might have changed the mind altogether during that duration. But there is nothing you can do now. But that's where Agile will help you. In Agile, we have concept of sprints. Again, there are many details, but I'll just keep it very simple for timing, okay? And we call here, or we have a concept here in Agile, which we call it as minimum viable product. Minimum viable product. This is what we call in Agile. Now, what is the meaning of it? What is sprint? What is minimum viable product? So in this case, team, what happens is the things happen in sprints. Now, and I'll tell you what I mean by sprints. So generally, there will be sprints. You can see of, let's just say, for example, okay, 2 to 4 weeks of sprints are there. Or for example, let's just say 2 weeks of sprint. Okay. Now here, we don't do everything as a whole. Like earlier, right? Earlier, what we used to have, we had to gather the entire requirements and everything as a whole, and then after understanding each and everything, then we'll move further for planning and designing and everything. No, here you go in sprints. So in the first sprint, in the first 2 weeks, first sprint, you will gather some requirements. Okay, the initial requirements are, I would say. Okay, in the first sprint, you will have initial requirements, not the entire requirement of your product. Initial requirements. Okay, on top of which you will do the planning and designing. And then you will kind of code it out, build it out, and you will deploy your code. Okay, with initial requirements. You will design, this is what we refer to it as a minimum viable product. Minimum viable product. Which is like in the first sprint, that is, for example, in the first 2 weeks, right? You will, with initial requirements, you are going to create an initial product, the first phase of the product. Okay, and the beauty of it is, once you're done with it, you are then going to tell the same to your customer as well, or the client as well. Okay, client, or you will tell the client that, okay, this is what we have developed in the first sprint. Okay, these were your initial requirements. This is the planning and designing what we have done, and now this is the code and build and deployment that we have done. Right? Are you happy with it? Is it? You'll ask this to client. Okay. Now, client, looking at your initial development, it will either say yes or no. Let's just say the client is happy. If the client is happy, then you can move for the next sprint. You see, then you can move for the next sprint. If he or she is not happy, you're going to modify that in the next sprint. You're going to do the changes according to why the customer is not happy with the first sprint or first minimum viable product. Right? So you'll then come for the second sprint. Second sprint, second 2 weeks, let's just say. We are going in smaller sprints. Again, you will go for the next set of requirements. Okay, you will plan and design upon it. Okay, you will then code it out, build it out, deploy it after the next set of next set of requirements. I mean, you'll add more things to it. Again, in the second sprint, what you'll do, this again will be your minimum viable product. Right? Now, the beauty of this is, again, after you're done with the second sprint, again, you will tell the same to your client. Okay, again, you will check whether the client is happy or not. You will understand whether the client is happy with the second sprint or not, with whatever the changes and whatever, rather the new or the further advancements that you have done, whether he or she is happy with or not, or the client is happy with that or not. And accordingly, after taking, so basically here what I'm trying to tell you, team, is here we, at every sprint, we are taking the consent of your client. And that is very, very important, because you see earlier what was happening? Earlier, the client was communicated only at the end, because once you had taken all the requirements and everything, there was nothing for the client to do. At the end only, after 6 months, 1 year, your client was getting communicated. Right? But that's not the thing here. Now, in this case, we are communicating with our client at every sprint as such. Okay, so this process, team, you see, it will go on and on and on and on till the last sprint. You'll have it. And the last sprint is where? I'll just say last sprint. Okay, where you'll have your final requirements. And by the time, by the time you'll reach down to that last sprint, you will have your finalized requirements, right? After getting the modifications, if there are some modifications the client has told. For example, in between, let's just say somewhere the client has come up with some modification to that sprint, right? You can as well do that, isn't it? That is the beauty of Agile, is that you don't have to get the requirements upfront. You can have such modifications being done because now you're going with minimum viable product. You're not doing the entire thing as a whole. You're going in smaller increments. Right? So you'll have final requirements, you'll have final planning and designing. Right? Then you have your code, then build, then final deployment, and then you will have ultimately this will be your final product. Okay, this will be a final product. And obviously, what will happen is in this case, you will have your client will be happy for sure, because your client was, or we were communicating with our client throughout this entire process. Right? So you see, this is how Agile, in fact, there are types to it and everything, but I just want you to understand it at an overview level first, is what is the difference? Why are we moving from Waterfall to Agile? Waterfall, while it was basically doing one thing entirely as a whole and then moving for the next thing, and it was time consuming and all. Here we are going in smaller sprints, 2 to 4 weeks of sprints generally you'll see. Okay, we are going in sprints, and after each sprint, the idea is we are basically communicating the same. We are getting the consent of our client every place. Right? So this is what is happening in the Agile. Now, in Agile as well, you see the same thing is there. In Agile, what happens? Again, we have a development team like before. Okay, so you'll have, because you have to work on that entire sprint, right, as a team, as a whole. So you'll again have a development team who will be working on the entire development part of it, right? And then you have your ops team, right? They were as well working on the operations part of it. Right, so in every sprint, you'll have your development team who will be developing the application code for that particular sprint. And then you will pass this development to your operations team, and then they will carry out the deployment of that, and then that product will be deployed. Right. So you see, even though we have moved from Waterfall to Agile, yes, Agile is as well better for sure than Waterfall. Here the client is even happy. But one thing that is not changed, you can see in both these cases, is even in Waterfall and even in Agile, we have a similar, interaction between development and operations. Now, this is what I want to discuss here. Pay attention, okay? So what is happening, whether you are in Waterfall or Agile, what is happening ultimately is, let's just say you have your development team. I'll just draw it here. And you have your operations team. You have your operations team. Now, what is happening here, team? Please pay attention. Is whether it is Waterfall or Agile, whether you have to figure out your requirements upfront beforehand only, or whether you are getting it in the sprints. Ultimately, what is happening is we have got two teams here. In any of those approaches, right, both these teams have to work in silos. Okay, so development team is working as a whole or as a team in silo, and in operations team as well, it is working together as a team in silo. Now, what I mean by that is, the problem is, you see, in both of these approaches, what is happening? Both of these approaches, what is happening is only once the entire development is done, right? I mean, in Waterfall, it is the entire development of the entire application. In Agile, it is the development of that particular sprint. But after that entire development is done, then that particular code, that particular application is passed on to operations. Right now, from there, it's like a relay, right? That you have ran till that point, and from there, you are passing the baton on to operations team. Now, the operations team job will be thereafter to take it further and deploy it and create a product out of it and entirely run it over. But the problem here is, team, that what generally happens is, let's just say there is some issue with that application code. Right? There is some problem or there is some bug in that application code, right? Then your operations team will again send that code back to development team. Okay, developers, yes, you have passed on that code, but we see that, okay, in the deployment, these are certain problems that we are facing, or the instructions that you gave us for deployment, they are not working well. The code is not deployable onto the production, whatever that could be the reason. Or at the evaluation, the code is failing. Whatever could be the reason, the operations will pass on that to development. Again, the developers will again work on that code. Again, they will pass on that, or again, they will send the code back to operations. Again, you see, if they find any issue there, operations team, again, operations will again send back that code to developers. Now, what is happening here? You see, ultimately, is developers, they are not understanding the expectations of ops, and operations, they are not understanding the challenges of developers. Because ultimately there is a lack of communication between the two. Because you see, that's obvious, right? They're working in their own teams, right? Let us assume that today you're working on a product, right? You're working on an end-to-end product, and you are working in two teams. First half of the product you are preparing, second half of the product your other team is preparing. Right? So once you're done with first half, then you're passing it out to the second half. But the problem is, second half, if there is some issue in the product that you have passed on, right? Again, you'll have to tell the back to the first team, and again they'll have to. So this back and forth was very common, and is very common in both those approaches. That's why we also call it that literally it is said that there is literally a kind of a wall that is there, or that was there, between dev and ops back then. A thick wall between the dev and the ops. Why? The developers, they were not able to understand the challenges of operations. The operations, they wouldn't understand the operations, they wouldn't understand the challenges of developers, and development, they wouldn't understand the expectations of operations. And that way there was a thick wall that was set up between. And that was causing many problems, like I said just now, right? And that's where, team, we wanted a better approach than this. We wanted a better approach than Waterfall. We wanted a better approach than Agile, where even though Agile is better, but still, if you see from the development and operations point of view, even here, there was this kind of a wall that was set up between. And same had been happening with Waterfall model as well. Okay, so team, that's where you see we needed, or we want somehow, that our developers and our operations, they could work together. We want somehow that our development and operations, you see, in the initial, yesterday as well, in the initial part, you yourself told me, right, that the developers, yes, I think I just saw a message. Yes, Waterfall change is not flexible, exactly. Operations team, Arfin, operations team, like I told you, everything after the development. There are many things that I have told you. The major responsibility on them is to deploy that application code onto the production environment. Okay, so the thing is, in order to prepare the production for the deployment, in order to make sure that your application code is deployable on production, right? Because you see, what happens is, let's just say I'm a developer, right? And I have developed that application on my Windows machine, right? And the client on the production end, or even our own company where we are deploying, the production is running on Linux. Right? Now, this is operations team job to make sure that your application code runs on that production. Now, yes, in that case, as a developer, for sure, I'm going to tell operations team, I'll be handing over the notes and instructions how to do it and all. But I mean, how to set that or production up for that. But still, it is the job of operations team to do it. Now, that's one thing. Another thing, operations team job is to convert that application into a product for the market. Okay, their job is to do it in a reliable and stable way, because ultimately you don't want your production to be affected, right? Your revenue is at stake, your reputation is at stake, isn't it? So we want to make sure that the product that we are giving out to client or to our production, it's all stable and reliable. Their job is as well to evaluate that application or that code or that particular product that we are giving out. Their job is to evaluate that it is worth going into production. It will run there, isn't it? I mean, we are also setting up monitoring at the end for that, right? So literally everything after the development is done, everything after you are done setting up the development, everything after that is taken care of by your operations team. Okay, so team, what I was saying is, this is what is or what was the need for a better approach. This is what is exactly the need to go for something better than Waterfall and Agile. We have just seen the two approaches which have been used over the time. Waterfall, Agile as well, today we use it. Okay, we have Scrum and all that I'm sure you must be using. But we wanted an even better approach where we could somehow make our development team to work hand in hand with our operations team, so that if we could resolve this lack of communication, if we could let them or if we could make them work together as a team, then we could make our entire software development a lot more efficient, right? We could curtail that time of deployment, right? So to get these many benefits, we are going for the third approach, which, as we know it, DevOps, right? So DevOps is the third approach that is there, or that is basically known for getting rid of,
Swami,
or basically
sorry,
curtailing that.
Swami, sorry for the interruption. I have just one
Okay, please go ahead.
question. So you said that we have waterfall model, we have agile model, and I understand whatever you try to explain. I completely understand. I agree with you. But what about the other soft SDLC models? Why we are not considering those models here?
Which model you want, Pritam?
Like V model or the incremental model, why not considering here?
Right.
Like,
You see, that's why I'll tell you. There have been variations. Again, I'm telling you, there have been variations in the approaches that have been taken up. But the most prominent ones, the three prominent ones with which there are variations. Again, as I've told you, I mean, if you go for Agile, there are even further. You can go for Scrum and all, right? So as a DevOps engineer, the prominent three that you have to understand first are these. Yes, I totally do agree. There are many other. There are variations of it. Companies have had their own versions of going for it. There have been various other variations of these approaches. But at the base of it, these are considered to be the three major approaches that we are going for. Isn't it? Again, I'm telling you, the course is all about DevOps, right? And that's why we have to understand what is the prominent other approaches that are out there. But there are certainly different variations of it that we can for sure explore to understand how we can go for it. But these are the two major ones. And the third major is the DevOps rhythm. Got it? So team, you see, like I told you, even going into any interview, right? For sure, they will check your understanding of why we are going for DevOps. While the two major approaches, the two major models that are out there or that have been there, that have been very popular over the time are Waterfall and Agile. Now, again, I'll tell you, are they entirely discarded? No. Okay, Agile, we are still using it. We are going in sprints. There are variations of it, like I just told, that are making it even better. But you see, the overall basis of, for example, as we are going to go for DevOps now, to understand what DevOps is, uh, the basis of these three approaches, they are altogether different. Okay, and you have to understand the distinction, the major distinction between the three. Okay, and then the companies have had their variations about it to make it better. Yes, they wanted Waterfall to go in one go. They have had their variations. We have for Agile its own variations that we have adopted further, and even for DevOps as we'll go for. Okay. So our next topic that we are going to focus on is going to be what is, now that we have understood what is Waterfall and what is Agile, now then we are going to go for DevOps. Okay. So team, our next topic, our next session will be entirely on this. We will be understanding what is there in this, and this is the approach that we will be focusing on, right? Throughout this course, we'll be understanding what is DevOps. We'll understand what different does it do than your Waterfall or Agile, and make the things a lot more efficient, right? So that's what team we're going to see in the next session. We're going to, from next session rather, we're going to understand what is DevOps now that we have understood these models, these two major models. And now we'll go for DevOps and see exactly how it is better than these two and why it is so popular now, right? Now and for some time now. Okay. So yes, team, that's it from my end. I can see some. Okay, just a second. Yeah. So that's it from my end. If you have any question, you can always unmute, or otherwise, we can wrap up the session now. And I'll see you in tomorrow's session. We are going to continue with the DevOps. Thank you, team. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you in tomorrow's session.
Hello.
Who's it?
No, sir. I'm saying thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good night.
Sir,
Thank you very
this
much.
is me,
Thanks a lot,
Shivam
sir.
Bharti.
Yes, Shivam. Go ahead.
Sir, where we can get the notes of your this that you are
Whiteboard?
teaching? Yeah.
I'll share you. I'll share you. Tomorrow, what I'll do, I'll share you. The very first thing, I'll prepare the PDF of it and I'll just share it with you, Shivam.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, sir.
Sir,
Okay.
Actually,
sir, we will create
no one.
any WhatsApp group, sir, so that we can communicate just like for notes and all these things. If someone just
No,
like
no,
I'm
the
not
team
able to.
will do it for you. No worries. I'll have a word with the team, the Spock in the backend for networkings, and the team will do it for you. Okay, so that all the resources can be shared with you in that way, isn't it?
Okay.
So I'll ask the team for that. No worries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, team.
Good night, sir.
Good night.